This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by LRN.FM. Feds don't want you to hear them. So, you heard me rant about the different things that private folks can do, and some of which I have done or hope to do to sort of fight the government in Beijing. Well, our priority probably should remain opposing our own government. But, and when I say fight, of course, it doesn't necessarily have to be a violent fight. In fact, done right over a long enough period of time, it might prevent the violent fight. But I want to talk now about the different things that the United States government and some other overseas governments could do without taxpayer expenditure to fight the Chinese Communist Party. Either fight it or peaceably fight it, depending on how you define the word fight. And depending on each suggestion. So one thing that pretty much no one ever talks about, it seems like, is the fact that most of these governments aligned against and close to mainland China have strict gun control compared to the United States, which itself has much more gun control than it should. Now, in a future war, with China, on the part of any of these countries, the kinds of weapons that will be used may begin to make firearms obsolete, but it still does a great deal of harm to, for instance, Taiwan's defense and South Korea's defense, especially South Korea, because they have very strict gun control. You do not interfere with the people's ability to act on their own against a foreign invader, because that is a huge part of the deterrent effect, right? The Iraqi military was of almost no value against the United States when it invaded Iraq in 2003. However, civilians armed with firearms have been able to drive the United States into something that would be considered basically a defeat. Most Americans don't feel like they won the Iraq War, I can tell you that. In the same way, Bosnian civilians were, the key to a large extent in defeating the Croatian and Serbian nationalist armies. Or maybe I should just say playing them both to a draw, despite being completely isolated. Almost completely. When your military fails, you got to have that second line of defense. And knowing that that second line of defense exists helps prevent countries from invading you in the first place. That's, of course, how it played out in Switzerland, where the Nazis tried all these different war games and all these different scenarios. If we land here, if we paratroop there, if we push tanks forward here, everything they came up with as a scenario ended up with them in huge trouble because of the wide dispersion of firearms in Switzerland and the firearms culture. Of course, we have that in the United States, which means we are probably safe from any kind of Red Dawn scenario in the absence of some wild technological change that the Americans are unprepared for and cannot match. But that can't be said for these potential victim nations on the Chinese borders. So each government simply has the power to eliminate whatever laws it has against weapon ownership. And I do mean all weapon ownership, with maybe the exception of weapons of mass destruction. So the average Taiwan resident should be able to own and deploy armed drones. She should be able to run and manage, for profit, a weapons manufacturing facility that sells directly to civilians who require no permit to own, deploy, carry, display, or brandish these devices. Heavy weapons should be allowed. People should be able to keep them in their homes. I think they do that in Switzerland. There's some extent to which it's allowed in Finland, I think. Of course, Americans are allowed to own machine guns. Unfortunately, they have to have a license for them. I believe we can also own heavy machine guns. but like mounted, the mounted kind. But that's the simple step. If you're so worried about China, and maybe you should be, just do that. The American government, for its part, could engage in a PR campaign. The president, whenever he's visiting someplace, he could make that a cornerstone of his policy. We hate to intervene in your local affairs, but hey, there's limits to what we can do to defend you. How about this as a solution? We would sure appreciate that, and if you do that, then, well, I don't know. We do something for you. Preferably something that doesn't involve any taxpayer expenditure. So this could be like sweetening trade deals, dropping trade barriers. Perhaps, let's say, how about just dropping absolutely all trade restrictions with Taiwan, right? On everything except for maybe some weapons of mass destruction type tech. Hold that over their heads as a bait in exchange for eliminating their gun laws, eliminating all their weapons laws, pretty much, so that the Taiwanese people have the option of becoming an arsenal of democracy in their own house. And you think they won't do that if they've got the chance? You know how fanatical they are against the Chi-Coms? They're better at it. They're better at that than we are. They would truly be a force to be reckoned with. Once decentralized like that, once armed on a dispersed and individual basis, and not just with firearms, not just with weapons that you currently understand. I'm talking about futuristic weapons, whatever's coming. There, boom. Now taxes go down, expenditures go down. Well, at least expenditures go down because you're not wasting money arresting people for owning things that you had banned them from owning. Trade increases, and whammo, you've got that's your move against China, and it can be done all over. Imagine how deadly and uninvadable India would become if you did something, if something like that were going on in India with gun freedom. Matched with India's almost excessive opposition to Beijing. Right now, that opposition is in spirit. These guns would make it really have teeth, or these eliminations on gun laws. I guess I should say. No, India will not descend into chaos if that happens. It didn't happen in Albania when everybody got a gun. There was this day once when the government sort of ceased to exist and people sort of just walked into the barracks and took whatever they want, right? There were 6-year-olds carrying Kalashnikovs around. I don't know how they were able to carry them, but they managed it. And, well, maybe they weren't 6, but I saw the video. And you know what happened after that? Nothing. You didn't hear Albania in the news again once after that. Except maybe that they were, getting ready for possible conflict with Serbia over Serbia's treatment of Albanians, right? Yeah, nothing happened there. Nothing happened there either. Not in Albania. This is a place where people were already building their villages on tops of mountains, because it was safer than building them in the valleys, because you'd be, attacked by the other tribe or whatnot. This was not a very civilized place, and yet it seemed to have done fine with gun freedom of a sort. Where did you get the problem? Oh, in civilized Yugoslavia, which had more gun control. Or at least a less even distribution of firearms, a less dispersed distribution of firearms. It wasn't as bad as people... there was some gun freedom in Yugoslavia, but not enough. But, taking a bigger picture, you just want to be looking at what are the things that the government is doing to help the Chinese Communist Party, and stop doing those. Or talk other governments into not doing them. If, in fact, you've really got to have a globe-trotting United States that's interfering in all these other people's policies, well, why not interfere in a policy that is actively harmful and costs money? So I don't know what that would be. I can assume there are all kinds of things going on. If you think about the 60s and 70s, the United States was actually, they were actively propping up the Soviet government, right? In 1956, which I realize was a different decade, but in 1956, the State Department actively assisted the Khrushchev, in reconquering Hungary, they issued a statement, to the effect that, the United States does not look favorably upon the existence of countries bordering the Soviet Union, which are hostile to the Soviet Union. Right? That's what they said. So that was the green light to wipe out the 1956 rebellion. So I'm sure other stuff like that's been going on. I guess, there seems to be some pretty credible claims now to the effect that the United States government was actually aiding the bioweapons lab at Wuhan, where the coronavirus was probably created. The CCP virus, I guess we should call it. Chinese Communist Party virus. How about we stop doing that stuff? Well, not we, they. Mark Edge over at Free Talk Live radio show in New Hampshire has recommended another good option: allow anyone from Hong Kong to immigrate to the United States with no conditions, no preconditions. Something like that. I'm not sure that's exactly what he said, but again, stop doing the things that are helping the Chi-Coms. If you're keeping the most active enemies of the Chi-Coms imprisoned by the Chi-Coms, if you're not letting them come here so that they die in Chinese jails, they're not doing as much good against the Chi-Coms. If they're here, not only will they bring their Hong Kong success with them, they can successfully organize against the Chinese government on their own without you having to give them anything. Now they'll do a great deal of good where they are too, many of them, but it's good to have some here too. All the ones that want to come here. We'd love to have you. But no, the IRS, or the ICE, the Immigration Service, has to make it insanely complicated to immigrate here. Because America, the United States, can lift restrictions that currently exist on you and me sending weapons to the Hong Kong rebels, and restrictions on sending other things to them. The mere existence of a lot of restrictions on a lot of things just has a chilling effect on sending anything, right? Like I used to send medicines overseas because there was a loophole that, like, if you sent them to a war zone, you could, or at least certain war zones, there was a 6-month grace period where if you could send the medicine before it expired, or maybe within 6 months of its expiration date, then it could be used after that. They just lowered their standards a little bit regarding medicine. Now I don't even have any idea how to go about discovering if that's still legal or not legal. I'm not even 100% sure it was legal back then. It looked like it was to me, but of course in 1992 it was difficult to search the internet for all the rules, and it's still difficult to figure out what all the rules are. If people just knew they weren't going to get in trouble for trying to help in the fight against the Chi-Coms, then they'd do more. And by getting in trouble, I mean getting in trouble with their own government, which has a way of trying pretty hard to shoot itself in the foot sometimes. Counterintuitively, the U.S. government should also eliminate pretty much all of its trade restrictions with China. Anyone there should be able to sell anything to Americans, and Americans should be able to sell anything to folks in China. I can certainly accept restrictions on weapons of mass destruction type stuff, but other than that, no. All the trade, make it happen, and but then go to the bully pulpit and encourage Americans to use their trade process as a propaganda tool, right? So maybe every time you buy something from Xinjiang on eBay, you just add a little message. You go to your Google Translate. You translate something into Mandarin or Cantonese, and you attach both versions because you probably won't know which one the seller speaks. But you attach a little propaganda message and send that to the seller. Tell them something maybe they didn't already know that's been covered up. A lot of people in China don't know about Tank Man, right? Send them a picture of Tank Man with your order. Actually, I guess you can do that already. But there are other things that, again, if the American government has gotten to the bully pulpit and urged people to do it, many of them will do it, and that's something that doesn't cost any money, or not any tax money. Trade should be used as an advantage against them, not as something to. It's not a liability. It's not a thing that would help necessarily keep them in power. It's a thing that would help bring them out of power. And the fact that people didn't use it very much for that purpose over the last 20 years, well, that's not trade's fault. Trade's always been something where you could have used. It's always been a tool that you could have used for that purpose. Then the Chinese would have no one to blame for their troubles if the Americans are open to all kinds of trade. Not the Chinese, the Chi-Coms, the enemies of the Chinese. By the way, did you know I did an internet search? It wasn't a very exhaustive one, but I was trying to find, like just American organizations that are united against the Chinese Communist Party. Even in organizations of expats. I really couldn't find much. There's victimsofcommunism.org, and it's probably more oriented against Beijing than anything else these days, just because of the fact that there are so many people in Beijing, and because Beijing appears to have helped poison the world with its virus, or at least the virus that it covered up. Now, historically, if you look at forming an organization like that would probably be useful. A private organization that sort of unites Americans in a private effort against Beijing. Maybe just helping refugees, maybe just providing propaganda, maybe just, lobbying for some of the things that I've outlined before. Actually, one thing you can do yourself. I'm sorry to get off the topic. I was trying to talk about things that the government can stop doing, basically. But one thing you could do, and which I hope to do, as soon as logistics permit, if they ever permit, you could go out and find a Confucius Institute. There's one in almost every state. These are Chinese government-funded college courses, usually. You could go and simply try to film one of your, government-funded professors at a government-funded university delivering a government-funded message to students. You could just try and film one of the lectures. And, of course, they would lose their shit if you did that. And, again, you don't want to hurt your enemy necessarily. You want to make your enemy hurt you so that you look like the good guy. So doing this, that's the perfect storm. Just walking in there and trying to film one of these lectures and just filming the shit storm that creates. The police they call, the things they try to do to you, what they threaten you with and all that. Or if you can figure out, or you could just walk up to one of these institutes even when there's no class and just walk up to whoever's there, right? And ambush interview them with a camera and put them on YouTube. That would be a useful thing that can be done soon. Again, we want to be kind to these people, because you never know which Communist Party funded person might actually turn on the Communist Party someday, or may already harbor doubts. But these institutes, I don't really favor necessarily shutting them down or anything that would cost money. I think they should be monitored and broadcast and reached out to, converted. Probably not something that the ambush interviewer will be able to do, but maybe it's something you can do. Maybe it's a good place to post anti-Chinese government propaganda or establish dialogue. To quote Sun Tzu, quote, having converted spies, getting hold of the enemy's spies, and using them for our own purposes, unquote. Or quote, "Our own flags should be substituted for those of the enemy, and the chariots mingled and used in conjunction with ours. The captured soldiers should be kindly treated and kept," unquote. I hear the FBI is investigating the institutes, and I almost fear that they'll be withdrawn from the United States. They're an opportunity, not a liability. And meanwhile, they're teaching our people Mandarin. That's great. The U.S. government should make it easier to leave the country and assist foreign armies and or rebel groups or refugees that are, going to be increasing in number over the next few years, probably, against Beijing. And they should do this by eliminating regulations, not by adding new ones. The FBI should stop investigating the Confucius Institutes and rather issue a statement urging civilians to do this job for them on a private basis and nonviolent. That would probably help because the FBI is useless about all these sorts of things anyway. It would just save money. If an FBI agent is really concerned about this, he should quit his job and fundraise on Spotify, or not Spotify, on GoFundMe or something like that, so that he can run a private operation of this type. He'll be useless as long as he's still serving the FBI. Remember, this is the institution that sent their bomb expert to testify at a New Hampshire drug trial right after the Boston bombing. God knows how many hours that guy wasted on this thing. This completely unimportant, well, at least completely victimless New Hampshire drug trial. No, talking about the FBI. The president could take to the bully pulpit, urging Americans to find ways on their own initiative of getting information into China. So, obviously a lot of this is on Chinese folks. They can set up VPNs and so forth and get to information outside the United States if they try. But propaganda is about reaching the people who aren't looking to be heard from. They aren't looking to hear from you. So I kind of like the idea of a private drone program that drones fly into China from, just wherever you feel like launching it, I guess. And they broadcast information. I don't know how that would work exactly. Maybe the drone just flies into China and drops off flash drives, kind of the way that it's working in North Korea without drones. But I think drones are a key. And also getting devices into China that can film things that are happening in some remote manner. I don't know how long the range is on modern drones, but obviously a long-range drone could do a great deal more than any other type. Make the Chinese government fight this stuff instead of fighting just to be able to trade with us. That's a fight that they should be allowed to win. Of course they should be able to trade with us. All of them, no matter who they are. You can't stop people from trading with each other without being the bad guy. Trade is always justified. It's always ethical, unless you're giving somebody something that only has evil purposes, right? You should be able to trade with anyone. I should be able to trade with F-bombing Kim Jong what's-his-bucket if I want to in North Korea. History's had a long time to judge Switzerland for its practice of trading with the Nazis. And I have never been convinced that they were in the wrong to do that. Especially when you compare what they did to what everyone else in the war did. And by the way, Switzerland was in the war. It was a combatant in World War II. It just wasn't on any particular side, right? I think the Americans must have bombed it 5 times. With B-17s or something. Well, I don't know. Each attack was probably a little bit different. But anyway, That's why they were able to continue trading with the Allies, was because they were trading with Germany. Trade is not the source of an evil. The evil is the source of the evil. And you punish bad guys by killing them if you have to in some cases, but not by cutting off their trade. Trade is almost by its very name a good thing. So let's we should, Americans, the U.S. government should let us use that to our advantage and to the disadvantage of the Chinese communists. All right, that's all I can think of. You may have some other, policy ideas of your own that no one will listen to, but you can post them on my comment section. I guess I'll listen. Or message me. Just find Dave Ridley, New Hampshire at Facebook. Because I'm not going to come back every month and read the comment section, probably. I'll just read it for the first few days. Thanks for listening. I don't like Freedom Radio talk. Listening to LRN FM makes me balk. Far from it, I should probably walk. LRN.FM. Feds don't want you to hear them.